Welcome to Psychology Ninjas. Today we're tackling realistic conflict theory as an explanation of prejudice. Okay, so when we're talking about this theory, how am I going to explain it? Well, we've already said the word theory a few times, so we know we're using our strategy that is key terms associated with realistic conflict theory. What are those key terms, I hear you ask? Well, here they are. We're going to talk about intergroup competition, negative independence, limited resources and connect that with competition, and superordinate goals as a means of reducing prejudice. It's really important that when you're explaining these key terms that you link them back to being prejudice as an outcome, as the behaviour that we're explaining. So why does intergroup competition result in prejudice specifically? From here then, how do you evaluate? Well, this is a theory, and so we're using SODA as our basis and as our acronym for success. Okay, so when we're mapping out SODA, we're wanting to talk about supporting research, opposing research, a different theory, and application. When we're talking about our different theories specifically, especially when we're talking about theories, we want to be making sure that we're saying, yes, it is an incomplete explanation, but why the alternative explanation is better. So social identity theory acknowledges the roles of emotions. When viewing in groups, it's acknowledging the role of self-esteem, which is not present in realistic conflict theory, and therefore this alternative explanation is more valid. How are we going to put this all together then in an 8-mark question? Well, your revision map should look like this. So we're connecting our AO1 with our AO3 in an interwoven response to develop those logical chains of reasoning. So intergroup competition, we're connecting with research support from Sharif et al. We're demonstrating our detailed and thorough knowledge by giving the specific percentages for the findings. But we're countering that and saying that actually this piece of research isn't all it's cracked up to be in terms of explaining intergroup competition, and intergroup competition itself was not enough to result in prejudicial behaviour. Therefore, we've got issues in terms of generalising this because additional provocations were needed, but this piece of research is generalisable because it was prejudice in the real world. When we're moving through to our opposing research, we're going to talk about that in relation to negative interdependence. And we're going to say that this theory lacks accuracy and validity because of the research conducted by Tajfel and the Bristol Boys study. We're saying here in our mini conclusion that extraneous variables, other causes to our effect, are significant, and that cause is this categorisation and group identity. When we're then moving through to talk about limited resources and competition, we're going to say that this is an incomplete reductionist explanation, and we're going to give that counter argument from social identity theory. Finally, we're going to talk about superordinate goals and link that into application because that's how we have reduced prejudice in the real world. We're giving some examples here, one from research and one in terms of how we might link this into psychology, creating or contributing to society. This gives our explanation credibility, and it's important that you make this connection between this has worked in the real world, therefore this explanation is accurate and valid. Okay, so slightly different question now. We've got explain one strength and one weakness of realistic conflict theory. We're still using all the same information, but this time we're just going to be focusing on that state and explain. What we need to do from our state is ensure that we're justifying this explanation or this strength. So we're saying that this has research support, which enables generalizability, or this has research support, which is ensuring that it is externally valid, and then we're giving that research support with our findings to show our knowledge. In terms of our weakness then, we could talk about that this theory lacks validity and give our counter argument. We could talk about incomplete explanation or application. Okay, so let's have a look at an exam question, and here it is on screen. What we always want to do when we're thinking about our exam question is bug that question so we know the focus is. So we put a box around our command word, and our command word is explain. So we know we've got to be explaining something, giving examples, illustrating our knowledge with our terminology. We need to be explaining how realistic conflict theory would link into Mr. Fitzpatrick and this specific scenario. Okay, so and how this would work in his school and what he is worried about in his school in terms of the name calling of the two different groups. Okay, so here's our mark scheme in relation to this, and this is what it would look like. So we need 4 separate pieces of application for the 4 marks available. We're going to be explaining terminology for intergroup competition, but this time we were giving examples about how this links into the STEM. So Mr. Fitzpatrick could consider the different interests of the groups and ensure that they're both met in order to reduce prejudice, because that's what he's looking to do in his school. Alternatively, we could be talking about negative interdependence, again giving an example, making it relevant to his STEM and the example that we've been given in terms of a primary school. You've got some other ones here, and as I said, you would need 4 separate examples linked into these different pieces of information. You could have more than one example on the same piece of knowledge. You could have different ones to spread it out and make sure you're covering your bases. Okay, here's a second exam question. So we've got Jack and a football team, and we've got rivals. Different command word here in we've got to what extent. So this is going to form a judgment at the end of it. You need to be structuring your response to say, yes, realistic conflict theory does explain, or it doesn't. Okay, we know we need to be explaining or linking this into the aggression of Jack's football team, and to what extent does realistic conflict theory give examples of that? Okay, so here's our mark scheme in relation to this question. We've still got all of the same information that we've talked about before, but because this is 16 marks and therefore would appear on paper 3, we want examples both in terms of intergroup competition, but also in that link, in that mini conclusion to form our judgment about whether this is or isn't explaining Jack's football team aggression. We can see that this would work through into negative interdependence. Again, we've got one team wins, one team loses. The use of penalties in tournaments ensure that there is always one winner. And we've also got that link back to the STEM and saying to what extent is this is realistic conflict theory the final argument. Because this is a to what extent question, we've also got a different explanation from a different area of the course, and I've gone for biological explanations in terms of testosterone. You can also talk about evolutionary explanations here, and therefore a holistic explanation is needed. We need to consider lots of different factors. You could go for different things here in terms of your different explanations. So you could be talking about social learning theory, that they've learnt this from watching the interaction of other football teams. You can think about great rivalries, maybe Manchester United versus Man City, might be a local team that you know that there is a great rivalry around. All right, here we've still got application, and that's the same as we talked about before. But we've got to have examples of how we would apply this, how we would bring those superordinate goals to our football teams, and therefore we've got credibility also linked into our STEM. The final thing we would want to do on this to what extent question is to ensure that we form a judgment about whether realistic conflict theory is the best explanation, or is your alternatives that you've given, are they a better explanation of that final scenario? Hopefully we've helped you out today. Don't forget to like our videos. Give us a comment below if you want to suggest any areas that we should go into next, or the next video that we should produce. Don't forget to subscribe so you're always updated with new content from Psychology Ninjas. Thanks for watching.